Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the latest episode of the Qarawiyyin Podcast. This is your host Aisha, and today I am joined with two of my co-hosts, Sara and Aisha. How are you guys? Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. How are you?
How's everything going? Yeah, good, alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah, everything's going good.
Yeah, how are you, Aisha?
Hanging in there.
Yeah, alhamdulillah. COVID times, but getting on with it. I always look forward to the fact that we are recording. It's a podcast. Like, it's just nice to kind of see you guys' faces and get together and talk about something. Alhamdulillah. And today we're joined by a very, very special guest for an episode that we're all super excited about. We're joined by Ustadha Jinan Yousef. Assalamu alaikum, Ustadha. How are you?
Alaikum salam wa barakatuh. I am great. So happy to be seeing your faces. So alhamdulillah, very good.
Alhamdulillah. So just to give a little bit of an introduction for people who don't know you, Ustadha Jinan Yousef has been an author for over a decade, writing about topics related to the Islamic faith. She has been a student of Sheikh Mohammad Akram Nadwi, alongside others, mashallah, and she is a course instructor at Al-Buruj Press and regularly lectures on the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, connecting to God and growing in faith. And alhamdulillah, you have recently published an amazing book reflecting on the names of Allah, which comes highly recommended by several scholars, mashallah. And this book gives a comprehensive commentary on the names and attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we have invited you here to talk a little bit more to us about that today, and just how, you know, we can come to know our creator and really reflect on the purpose of our existence. So I was wondering if we could start off with you telling us a little bit about your background and how you came to write this book.
Okay, so first, thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you so much for inviting me to be on this podcast. One thing that I love talking about is Allah's name, so I'm super happy to be doing that with you all. So in terms of my background, I was actually thinking about this question. I wasn't sure if it was, my studying background or just writing this book. So I'm going to combine the two. But I think it's interesting because obviously they're related to each other. So where I grew up in the Emirates. It's interesting because the way that women study here is kind of at an informal level in people's homes. So I remember kind of in a sense, being very young, and we had obviously Islamic studies at school. And I was fortunate enough, I think, to have an amazing Islamic studies teacher. And she was probably the first person who ever said, talk to Allah. When you're just sitting in your room, just talk to Allah, tell Allah about your day. And I was, I think, maybe 12 or 13 years old. So, but this was something that was very different because probably when I was younger than that, probably like under 10 years old, I might have dealt with certain people who took religiosity to mean increasing in the outward without perhaps, accompanying that with kind of the inner characteristics or, adorning, their character with what we're supposed to in our faith in terms of just being good to people or nice to people and so on and so forth. So there was that kind of slightly negative experience when I was very young. But then I had this amazing teacher at school. And so we were, in a sense, taught the foundations. But then out of school, the way that women were taught, this was, long time ago, like in the 90s, you'd go to other people's houses, and a lot of the women who taught us were, they were students of knowledge themselves, or they had already studied and they were, much older. So we kind of had this really beautiful women's community, really, where, women taught other women. And I think the one thing that I do remember from that, which as I grow up, I realized that it's maybe not so common in other places, was that one's personal relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was really emphasized. It wasn't just, you have to pray, you have to put on hijab, you have to do XYZ. Like, it really wasn't so much about that. It was like, when you're praying, you need to connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yes, everything, your prayers, the movements, they all have to be correct and they have to be sound, but remember that you are talking to Allah. And so I had, I think, that kind of experience. And at the same time, that kind of what accompanies it, and this is something that was, very big, back in the day as well, was, you had scholars or preachers, in my day, the person who was probably the most popular who spoke to young people was Amr Khalid. And again, his way of teaching was really, again, to connect people to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And again, like I, grew up in the Arab world. And so, he came and he visited my school when I was young. So it wasn't, and I went to a girls' school again. So this wasn't very strange as well. We had like a scholar here who was Egyptian. His name is Umar Abdul Kafi, and he would do specific classes for women. So we kind of had that, background of it wasn't really very strange for women to have, firstly, their own spaces with each other. And then at the same time also having, male scholars dedicate, the time to teach women. And sometimes they would say that they would get more women in their classes and more interest from the women in their classes than the men, because over here it's not very usual for women to go to Friday prayers. But all the men go to Friday prayers. But in lieu of that, men or male scholars would make the time to teach women, and it usually ended up being more. So, Friday prayers once a week, you have, your half an hour khutbah, whereas for women it would be like twice a week, once a week, hour-long class, or like really super long, workshops. And so you kind of had that combination. So I think for me, just the idea of really connecting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, firstly, obviously through your prayers and just really talking to Allah and just having this connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that was, I would say, just foundational. Like it was the most natural thing in a sense. And then in terms of then obviously how did this develop and come and result in this book, I think when I traveled abroad, right, so obviously you meet people of different backgrounds, you meet mashallah amazing people from all parts of the ummah, and I think what I found was that a lot of people, it was very kind of dry. You need to pray, you need to do all these things. And then, of course, yes, you should be nice, you should be a good Muslim, you should be this. But I found what was missing was this really like a personal relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that was touched upon when people would talk about dua, for example, supplicating to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But it wasn't, I would say, it wasn't really focused on. And so I, in general, I write reflections. So I kind of, started with writing emails. And initially, actually, my emails weren't to do with the names of Allah. They actually had to do with the Prophet ﷺ. And maybe my undergraduate cohort would remember that, it would be like a weekly thing where I'd send something about the character of the Prophet ﷺ. And then after that, like, I'd call it a simple sunnah. So something I was like, okay, just smile at somebody. You know what I mean? Like, eat with your right hand. So like the simple things that you could incorporate in your day. But the main story was something that you really have to try to inculcate in your character. And then, after that, I had, met kind of Imam Suhaib Webb, and he had seen some of my writings, so he asked me to write for his website. And slowly, I started writing again. It was about the internal elements of prayer, and it was mostly, to be honest, it was to keep me on track. So I was watching the series. I remember it was a series in Arabic by a Kuwaiti da'iyah. His name was Mishail Kharraz, and the series was called كيف تتلذذ بالصلاة, like how can you taste the sweetness of prayer, like really just love being in prayer. And so I really wanted to focus, so I started just writing notes, and I was like, you know what, let me just do the notes in English, and then I can just send it to my friends. And after that I just started publishing it on the website. But then one thing that I found, so after that, a lot of people, when they would come to ask sometimes for advice, or maybe they were having, issues, in their faith and in their belief, I found that a lot of it stemmed from misconceptions about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I remember finding this, very surprising. It's like, oh my goodness, does Allah hate me because, I made a mistake? And, kind of attributing things to Allah that if you were to attribute it to a human being, you would say that human being is not very nice. So imagine attributing these kinds of things to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so again, it was also kind of inspired by Amr Khalid. He had a Ramadan series, one Ramadan, I can't remember, it was a really long time ago. But he took a name a day. And the way that he had done it was, he'd talk about the meaning, kind of like just linguistically, what does this name of Allah mean? But then it's like, how do these meanings manifest in your life? How do you connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through this name? And I kind of, used that as a model and an inspiration when I thought, okay, you know what? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to know him. Otherwise he would not have revealed all these beautiful names. And so I suggested it to Imam Saywab. Now, by that time, the website has transitioned into virtualmosque.com. And yeah, that's what I started writing. And I did it really slowly. Like, I don't know if any of you were following the series on virtualmosque.com, but like it took around 4 years. And so it was kind of like one a month and then one every 2 weeks. But I really wanted to take my time and like writing these names and really thinking about, what does it mean for me to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as being, as-sabur, for example? What does it mean for me to know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Al-Kareem, the most generous, As-Sabur, the most patient. And so that's kind of what started it. And then, the book was really funny because I joke that I was coerced into writing the book because after I had finished the series on virtualmosque.com, I thought, okay, khalas, alhamdulillah, I've done this, and it's a resource that's online that is available to everybody. Inshallah, everybody can read it at any time. But a lot of people were saying, you should really develop it into a book. And I'm like, I'm not sure. But then subhanAllah, it's amazing. Because these are the names of Allah, you cannot reflect on them too, enough. And so every time I would think, subhanAllah, I would just write different reflections, right? Whichever name of Allah that I felt I was connecting to. And people were saying, you have that foundation, just write a book incorporating the new insights. And so, prayed istikhara, made sure that, I'd have, teachers look at it and just make sure that everything, was okay. And then kind of, subhanAllah, like the last stretch of writing the book came during lockdown. So, sometimes, there are blessings and difficulties because, I had started work and things like that. So I didn't have so much time to dedicate to it. But then once lockdown came, I was like, okay, this is from Allah. I need to, kind of just get this done. And so, subhanAllah, but even, after publishing the book, it still feels incomplete. Like when people say like, oh, mashallah, you published the book. And then I'm like, okay, alhamdulillah, jazakumullah khairan, but at the same time, like I look back on it, I'm like, I wish I incorporated this. Because again, like every time you reflect on the name of Allah, every time, the more you live your own life and you go through different experiences, you yourself witness different manifestations of Allah's names in your life. You connect to different names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in different times of your life. And so I think this is like almost a disclaimer. So I consider the book, unfinished. But I think it's just means that it's for everybody. It's not just about, reading a book. It's really about reflecting on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's names and the manifestations of his names in our own life.
MashaAllah, Ustadha Jinan, that's like a really beautiful way of looking at and understanding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's asma' wa sifat, his names and attributes. And what I really liked was just how you said from, a really young age, that personal relationship with Allah was really emphasized, and, the importance of it was really emphasized in your upbringing and throughout your life, it sounds. I just wanted to ask, why do you think it's important, or why would you say, not that anyone's disputing this, but that it's important to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this way? And what difference do you think it makes on our worship of Allah?
So I think firstly, the reason, or why we should know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this way and through his names is literally because he revealed those names, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala really could have just said, I am Allah, worship me, and if you don't, you go to hell. And unfortunately, that's how a lot of us think of Allah. Like a lot of us think of Allah in this one-dimensional way, right? But he didn't. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, throughout the Quran, he's always emphasizing his different names and his different attributes. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in a sahih hadith, he says that, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has, at least 99 names. And whoever, I'm just going to use loosely translated, say whoever knows them, right, enters Jannah, right? And if you think about it, is it just knowing? Is it just, memorizing? But no, of course not. Because even the word used, it's either ahsaha or hafidaha. So, people sometimes translate it as, memorize it. But we have the same usage of the name ihfad, for example, in another hadith of Prophet ﷺ where he says, ihfad Allah yahfadak, right? It doesn't mean memorize Allah, right? It means, be aware of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Allah will protect you, right? So there's different meanings of ihfad. And so when the Prophet ﷺ tells us, because anybody can memorize the names of Allah, right? Any human being, whether you believe... Exactly, right? And not even that, you don't even have to believe in Allah and you can memorize His names, right? So it's not really about that. So I think, and there's a reason why they're names, right? Because now if I would ask any one of you to talk about the person who you consider to be the closest person to you, right? And you would say, so again, like I'm going to ask you right now, Aisha, like tell me something about your best friend, like an attribute, something that you would describe your best friend. Just give me 2 things about her or him.
Intelligent and compassionate.
Okay, there we go. Intelligent and compassionate. Now, to me, that doesn't really mean much because I don't even know who your friend is, right? But to you, it means a lot, right? When you say intelligent, you probably have memories, you probably have experiences of this super intelligent person who you call, your best friend, right? What was the second one again? Compassionate, there we go, right? And compassionate. And so you have experiences, like when you're telling me she's intelligent and she's compassionate, it is, the reason why, it's because you've experienced her intelligence, you've experienced her compassion, right? And you know her, and the reason why you feel so close to her and you love her, maybe even trust her with your life, right? Is because you know her so closely. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah knows us, Allah created us. He knows we need this personal connection. And so when you know that Allah is as-sabur, what does that look like in my life, right? When you know that Allah is ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, what does that look like in my life, right? And it really transforms everything, because firstly, in terms of, let's just say, our acts of worship, when you know who you're standing in front of, right? That you're not just, oh my goodness, I have to do this prayer because otherwise if I don't, I'm going to go to hell, right? But rather, I'm standing in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and even though Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-Azim, He's so great, but yet I have this like personal meeting with Allah, and even though He's so great and He's the dominant and He has all these attributes of majesty, but He's also so kind. And Allah responds to me, and He's al-Qarib, He's close, like He's close to me, like who am I? And yet I have this close relationship to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why it is so important. And that's why Allah gives us these names and attributes. It's not something that somebody made up, 100 years later or today, because, we're not trying to be like new age hippies or something. Like, no, this is really Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He revealed these names to us, and you see them throughout the Quran. And it's really for you to connect, for you to think about, what does it mean for Allah to be Al-Ghafur? What does it mean for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be Al-Ghafur, the most forgiving? What does it mean for, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be Al-Qarib, the close one? Like, Allah's close to me, like I'm close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so it transforms even the way you look at things in your life. Like, you might have messed up. The first thing, you can, start to hate yourself and feel super guilty about what you did and be like, oh my goodness, I'm never going to be a good, good Muslim or good person or whatever it is. But then you think, wait, Allah's Al-Ghafur, and He has so many names actually related to forgiveness, that He's Al-Ghafur, He's Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, He's At-Tawwab, He's Al-Afu. It's like He's almost telling you, like, whatever you did, you can go back to Allah. Like, whatever you did, you can go back to Allah. So it really touches on every single part of our life. It touches even our relationship we have with ourselves, because sometimes we project the way we feel about ourselves onto Allah, right? Like, I might be having, issues with myself, right? I might be, going through whatever. I have self-esteem issues. I've, have mental health difficulties, whatever it is. And I'm really feeling really horrible about myself. I start to project onto Allah that, oh, maybe Allah hates me. Maybe Allah, wants to make this difficult for me because He wants me to go to hell. And you start to, astaghfirullah, but you turn yourself into Allah, almost in the sense that just because you feel a certain way about yourself, you're saying, oh, Allah must feel that way about me. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He never says that, right? Literally, if you look at the way that Allah talks about the believers, even when they mess up, like, your heart will melt. You're just like, this is just amazing. This is amazing. Like, you will not experience this with any human being, no matter how close you are to them. And this is why, Ali bin Abi Talib, they asked him, they said, on the Day of Judgment, right? If you had the choice between being judged by Allah or judged by your parents, who would you choose? Now, if people are being real, like, people be like, oh, I choose Allah. Like, okay, really, like, really. Yeah. Like, you know what I mean? Like, most people's like, I want to say Allah, but in my heart, no, like, of course, my mom, right? Like, I mean, just to be real, right? But Ali bin Abi Talib, he's like, Allah And he said, why? He's like, because I know Allah is more merciful towards me than even my own mother. So imagine knowing that to that degree, that, your mother, who was, the most merciful person towards you, or, whoever, your parent, your father, maybe you're super close to your father, right? And you know that your father, oh my goodness, he'd never do anything to harm you, right? And you think over that, you would choose over him or over her, you choose Allah? How close must you be? How deeply must you know the attributes of Allah? What experience must you be having when you pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Again, because you know His names and attributes, that He has named Himself this. Again, we're not giving Allah names, right? We're not making things up and saying, oh, God is this or God is that. This is as He described Himself. This is the way He described Himself in the Quran. This is what He has revealed to the Prophet ﷺ about His names. So it's not just that it transforms your acts of worship. It transforms literally the way you deal with life, and even the way you deal with yourself, right? That you can even be more forgiving of yourself, right? Because if you're sitting here and you're, annoyed at yourself for messing up again, and really it's because you can't forgive yourself, but then it's like Allah's telling you He's forgiving you. You're just like, well, I gotta forgive myself. Allah's forgiving me. So, so you transform the relationship, your own relationship with yourself. And it's really, and honestly, when the Prophet ﷺ, says, the person enters Jannah, it's almost like you enter into a Jannah before you enter Jannah. And that's the Jannah of knowing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this life, to a certain degree, to the degree that we are capable of, right? Mm-hmm. And just to add, recently I was reflecting on Surah Al-Kahf, and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He talks about, وَرَبَطْنَا عَلَىٰ قُلُوبِهِمْ, right? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He strengthened the hearts of the youth of the cave. And if you think about their situation, they are facing, this tyrant king, their youth, their fitya. The fitya is what we would call today maybe teenagers, right? Fitya is 16, 17, something like that, right? And so to stand up, إِذْ قَامُوا فَقَالُوا رَبُّنَا رَبُّ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ, they stood up, right? And it's Allah gave them strength, right? And it's they weren't focused on the hardship, they were focused on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah talks in several places in the Quran about who He gives this Rabb to, right? That He, literally it's to tie the hearts, but it's to strengthen the hearts, right? And so imagine that you can be facing an external difficulty or something that, it might even be unimaginable. But in your heart, literally, because you are so close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that Allah gives you that strength, and you have that strength through knowing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Yeah, subhanAllah. I'm reflecting on what you're saying now about the importance of knowing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the immediate effect it has on one's life. And also what you mentioned about, what access you had to Islamic studies and just Islamic lectures and things as a kid. Because at first I remember my parents watching Omar al-Kafi and Amr Khalid on TV all the time. But also I remember that, and I grew up in California, we were watching them, from here. But also remembering that I felt and I think this is common for a lot of Muslims, whether in the Muslim world or outside of it, that if your interaction with the deen is through these sort of short once-off workshops, there's only so much that can be conveyed in those. You can't really get very deeply into any there's the concept, and then there's how to practically achieve it in your life. So I understood that I was supposed to know Allah and that I was supposed to have khushu' and salah, but I didn't know practically how to do those things. And I wasn't aware that, in my daily life, there are things that I can do to work towards them. So there can even be this shallow awareness of these ideas, but not a deeper understanding of how to come closer to them and how to actually make sure that they have an impact in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, subhanAllah, Ustadha Jinan, you've just said so many things that resonated so much with me, but particularly with what you were saying about, feeling close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because I think the reality is that in this day and age, God feels very distant for a lot of people. And I think, obviously, I'm speaking as well to my context, which is especially in the UK, we're a very secular country. And sometimes when I'm speaking to friends and family in the US, I hear that, it's quite open for people to generally talk about God or talk about religion in a way that isn't shameful and isn't taboo. And really, I felt that through most of my life, and particularly, spending time in education, you really cannot bring up God in a way that isn't looked down upon. And the only exception to this was when, for my last 2 years of high school, I went to a Catholic college. And the fact that even we could acknowledge that there is a God, because they had a chapel and they wanted to encourage people to pray, and the majority of their intake was students who were Catholic. Funnily enough, most of the students didn't believe, they were Catholic in name only, and you would see that it was often minorities and Muslims in particular who would be more dedicated to their religion. Funnily enough, actually, as the Muslims, like, we used to have a room in the chapel to pray Jumu'ah in. So it wasn't like attached to obviously the areas where there was, you know, any idols or anything to do with Catholicism, but it was just nearby. So funnily enough, they'd have mass on like a Friday at lunchtime, and you would see a scattering of students and like then a few teachers coming to attend the mass, and just a constant stream of Muslim students going past in order to get to the room in order to pray to pray Jumu'ah. So subhanAllah, it's not an environment in which we often feel comfortable even talking about God, such that then to try and relate it to our own faith feels like a big jump. And we need to have that constant reminder, and also I think deconstruct many of the myths that we've internalized about God, and particularly as well balancing, I think, being excessively fearful of Allah, but then also thinking Allah's so merciful, I can do anything and just, you know, nothing will happen to me. You know, Allah is a God of love, especially like you're saying in this kind of hippie new age time where God is all just about love and peace and happiness, and there's nothing else there. So what misconceptions would you say that you've found in relation to the way in which we relate to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his names?
So I think in terms of misconceptions, I would say that there are two types. So there's one that is kind of the subconscious misconception. And the subconscious misconception is kind of like what you talked about, either that, you know, people are so afraid of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and they really think of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as like, he's just waiting to get you. Like, you know what I mean? He's like, astaghfirullah, but, you know, not, you know, obviously nothing, we don't compare anything to Allah, but like really the way people, you know, interact with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is like, you know, like he's some, you know, cop waiting behind the bush to like catch you as you're speeding and, you know, give you your speeding ticket. Astaghfirullah al-azim. But like in reality, that's what people seem to think internally, right? Without even, I mean, they don't verbalize it in this way, but you see it in the way that they think, that the way they act in their faith, the way that they think about their faith, the way that everything seems, you know, just really super heavy. And then, like you said as well, there is the other side of it, which is, you know, like, as you said, like, God is just love, and it's like, and it's, you know, it's not even God anymore. It's the universe that is moving you towards, you know, your end goal or whatever it is, right? And your end worldly goal as well. This is really important. So anything spiritual is actually the end goal is this world. And so I think, you know, I would say I've found more of the former. But again, probably if I'm giving halaqas, for example, or something like that, it is usually because, you know, people want to come and, you know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and some, you know, do kind of come from this background of really thinking of Allah as, you know, unfortunately, but out to get them. Right? Or like, you know, we said that, you know, religion is kind of like this dry thing and you have to do this formulas and then, you know, khalas, you know, you'll enter into paradise. And so I would say that, you know, I found more of this type. And again, it's because of the way that many people were taught religion as they were younger, but also the things that they've seen. Right? Sometimes, you know, when a person becomes quote unquote more religious, you see it, you know, maybe them transforming externally. So if it's a woman, maybe she, you know, put on the hijab, or maybe she put on the niqab. If it's a man, you know, he started to grow his beard super long, you know what I mean? And then his thobe is like getting shorter, right? So you see those things which you associate with being religious, but then again, this is not for everybody, but sometimes, or at least what people who come to me, what they've experienced, that this isn't accompanied with, you know, being more gentle, you know, being more open towards other people, being more compassionate, and so on and so forth. And so these are, in a sense, the misconceptions that I found mostly about Allah. And I think, again, because we don't focus on, you know, Allah's 99 names, right? We don't focus on these things. And so we don't even focus on a few of his names, not even 99, but even just a few of his names that we forget, that we start with his attributes and with his names of mercy when we recite the Quran, right? But then on the other side, and something that I've probably found more lately, is again this misconception that, you know, Allah loves you so much that it's totally and completely unconditional, and that, you know, you can, in a sense, you don't have to do anything, really, because it's that unconditional. You don't have to do anything. You know, Allah knows what's in your heart, you know, it's all about the intention, right? And so we use kind of things that are actually true. I mean, it is about, you know, your intention, right? But it's also about action. And so it's kind of, in a sense, merging these two. And when you study the names of Allah, you find this really beautiful balance, right? You really find this hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but knowing his attributes and his names of majesty, they are in a sense what, propel us to want to act, to want to be closer to him, to want to submit to him, right? And so it's always having these two in mind. And again, that's why it's so important to know Allah's names holistically, not just I want to focus on the names that I want to focus on, but like actually who Allah is and how he describes himself. Perhaps the other misconception that is, it has to do with Allah's names specifically. I get this question a lot. And it's kind of, how do I use Allah's names? And, something about me, a lot of times when something is related to Islamic studies, I translate it into Arabic in my head because I think I'm bilingual, but my primary language of instruction for Islamic studies is Arabic. So when somebody says, how do I use Allah's names? It does not translate into Arabic. I'm just like, what do you mean use? Like, it's not like a tool. It's not like this machine that you press a button and then, something happens. And so I find that a lot of Muslims, we become very formulaic, right? Mm-hmm. And we don't realize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he didn't reveal letters without meaning. He revealed a name, right? And the name means it's literally for you to know him. So a lot of people, they say, how do I use this name? How can I use this name in a dua? And I'm just like, well, pray to Allah, right? And if it relates to that, if you want, Allah's kindness, if you want Allah's mercy, if you want Allah's healing, then you will call upon Allah with those names, right? But when we make it really formulaic, like give me an exact dua, but the most beautiful dua is a dua that comes from the heart. And we look at, I think the most beautiful thing, if you look at Surah Al-Anbiya, Ayyub alayhi salam. So, when somebody, they say, okay, I'm sick, so I'm only going to call upon Allah's name, Ash-Shafi. And yes, you should, of course, call Allah, Allah Ash-Shafi. There's a reason why he revealed his name Ash-Shafi, right? But if you look at Ayyub alayhi salam, it says, أَنِّي مَسَّنِيَ الضُّرُّ وَأَنْتَ أَرْحَمُ الرَّاحِمِينَ, right? Verily, affliction has touched me, and you are the most merciful of those who show mercy. Because at that moment, he felt like, I need Allah's mercy. And I know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most merciful. Like, yes, part of mercy is shifa, right? But he was feeling so connected to, shifa, healing. But he was feeling so connected to this name of Allah, or feeling that he needed this all-encompassing mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that he called on Allah, Ash-Shafi. Al-Rahman Ar-Rahim. And so I think sometimes we become really formulaic, very, trying to make this into this 1 + 1 = 2, but it's like, no, this is a relationship, right? This isn't, this is not like, we're trying to, automate a relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Like, this happens, I'm going to do this +1 + 2, but it's like, no, it's like if I were to tell you, let's just say, if you were in trouble, right? God forbid, I don't know, you find yourself in the police station or something, right? Who would you call at that moment, right? You might have a lot of people who are close to you, right? Maybe, your parents, maybe, you have brothers or sisters, your friends, but there's that one person who in that situation you would call. Why? Because you know them, you know all of their attributes. So it's the same thing when you call on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? It's because you know his attributes. So you're not going to be like, okay, let me look through my list and be like, okay, I'm going to choose, this, and I'm going to do it this many times. No, it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, he's al-Kareem, he's the most generous, and I really I just feel like I need this abundance. Like, Ya Kareem, please, I need so much, I need from you. Like, I feel so poor, I feel so impoverished, right? And so that I feel like people really need to think about it in that way. But I think also thinking about it in that way requires more work from us. And it's much easier to rely on the formula. And this is probably, the reason why, prayer, we focus so much on the fiqh, because at the end of the day, you can get the fiqh right. You study it and, you can, in like a week, maximum 1 month, you can get the fiqh right. Everything is perfect. Every vertebrae is in its place. Your hand is in the right place. This is, you can do that. And that's easy. It's easy to turn it into a habit, right? But relationships aren't habits, right? Relationship is like, no, you keep working on the relationship. You keep developing, you keep evolving in your relationship. And it needs work, like with relationship with anybody, right? Whether it's with your parents, whether if you're married, it's with your spouse, whether it's with your brothers, your sisters, your friends, whatever it is, it kind of needs this constant engagement. And because in a sense, like I'm saying it's harder. I actually find it, easier because it makes everything else in life easier. But it's harder in the sense that like it's more effort. It's a beautiful effort, but it's more effort for you to engage with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in that way, as opposed to rely on the formula, rely on, okay, I did this, yalla, let's tick it off the list. We're going to tick it off and khalas, we're done. I've done my salah. I've said Allah's names this many times, even though I have no idea what I was saying, right? But I've memorized the nasheed. I have memorized the nasheed on Allah's names. I can sing it, really well. And khalas, I'm done. Inshallah, I have Jannah, right? And inshallah, Allah is generous. May Allah give you, Jannah for that, right? But if you really want, to feel close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to really see the manifestations of Allah's names in your own life, it will require this engagement from yourself. It will require for you to really reflect on Allah's names.
Yeah, absolutely. You've really put it into context just that it makes so much sense when I'm sort of hearing you say it in this way. And particularly what you were saying about usage and how we kind of think about how do we use this. And very often as well, we equate that to only a physical kind of action that we're actually doing. But subhanAllah, so often when I'm kind of thinking about this or reading about how we should be utilizing this, very often the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are for us to reflect on and for us to really engage in that tadabbur, which very often kind of we miss and is not given as necessarily a prescription that we should do. It's always kind of even about, use it in salah, use it in dua, which is obviously perfectly fine. But very often I find that when I'm actually just reflecting on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's names, it has so much more depth for me. And specifically with regards to the misconception that you were talking about first, in terms of people thinking that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is this wrathful, vengeful God. And I think that it's definitely something that you see in the Christian tradition, and people have this idea of like the God of the Old Testament being really kind of mean and ruthless, and the God of the New Testament being a bit better. But it's in many other traditions as well. And I just always think that when I think about Islam and how we view God, the first thing that comes to my mind is Ar-Rahman and Ar-Rahim. And obviously these two names both come from Rahma, meaning mercy, but obviously the linguistics and the specificities of Arabic give both of them very unique meanings, such that Rahman, as I've understood it, is Allah's mercy that applies to everything in this world. Like, it's all of humankind, believers and non-believers, it's animals. And so often we can be watching a nature documentary, and they show like a really cute scene of this mother bear looking after her cub and all of the problems that they have to go through in the Arctic, and the ice caps are melting and all of this stuff. And subhanAllah, just to know that mercy ultimately emanates from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that is, he is the origin of that, is just really quite mind-blowing. It's another level of mercy. It's not just somebody being kind to you. And then obviously we have Ar-Rahim as well, that is a mercy specifically dedicated to believers as a reward in this life and the akhirah. And the fact that, as you were saying, we say this in every single salah, in Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, we say it immediately in the second ayah of Surah Fatiha. I feel like that's more than anything what Allah wants to impart to us, obviously with conditions and not to take it to kind of an excess as well. But it's just so sad that very often people's first impression of God is this ruthless, mean person, when I feel like Allah's just trying to tell us completely the opposite.
Absolutely. And actually, if I can just add one thing, because I wanted to say this, but I got so into what I was saying that I forgot. But basically, another actually misconception is exactly what you're saying, because of the media. I mean, the media is kind of, quote unquote, like Western media, but obviously the origins of a lot of ideas and philosophies is in kind of Christian thought. And we find that, it permeates a lot of Muslim thought as well. And so people do see Allah as a human being, a man specifically, right? With like these certain attributes, this, man or person in the sky. And I remember, again, this was once an undergraduate and someone, and this was a Muslim brother, he was saying something like, it's really hard for me to like think like, you have Allah, God on one side and the devil on the other side. I was like, what God on one side and the devil on the other side? It's Allah's up here. Everything else is created is down here. You want to say devil and human being, devil and angel. Okay, sure. Right. But again, you watch, I don't know, like Tom and Jerry or something, right? Like, and it's like, and that's kind of, they'll have some kind of scene and it's literally like God against the devil. Right. And it's just like, no. Literally not. Like, it's Allah created everything else, and whatever his creation want to fight amongst each other, fine, do you, right? But it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is at the top. And I think this actually really affects the way we think of Allah. And again, because this is the type of media that we watch. I remember once, again, Trevor Noah, they had an interview with him. I don't remember who interviewed him, but they asked him a question about religion. He said, I'm spiritual, not religious, or something like that. But the reason why, it was so interesting. And I was like, bro, do you not know Muslims, or not know Islam? Because he said something that, at the end of the day, when human beings, create a religion, they just try to make God like them. So I do believe that there's something higher, but, human beings, they always, they put themselves in God. Right? And it's and so, I don't think that's what it is. And I was thinking, ليس كمثله شيء.
Yeah.
I really think you need to study your Islam. There's nothing like him, nothing like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is again, when we study the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that it's always, it has to be not in the back of your mind, at the forefront, that anything that we are saying here, we're just scratching the surface, if that, right? It's something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has to give us his names in a language that we understand, otherwise it wouldn't mean anything. But it's mercy that you cannot imagine. Even when the Prophet ﷺ talks about Jannah, and he says, ما من عين رأت ولا أذن سمعت ولا خطر على بال بشر, right? That no eye has seen, no ear has ever heard this. It hasn't even crossed the minds of any human being. But then still he tells us, the ground is there's saffron and there's rivers and there's trees. But okay, you can imagine rivers and you can imagine trees and fruits and all of that. That's not. But it's I just want to get it closer to you. You know what I mean? So you can just think of how amazing it is, but it's actually something that never crossed your mind, right? So those emotions that you get of how amazing it is to have, I don't know, gold and silver or pearls, or, this was, back in the day, maybe for us, people, like their cars, they might say Bentleys or something like that, or whatever it is that is, the most valuable thing of the day, whatever excites you, that you're thinking, wow, Jannah is going to be full of these valuable things that excite me, right? But it's actually something that hasn't even crossed my mind. Right? And the same with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When I think of mercy, like you said, when we see animals, and the way that a mother, whatever it is, a bear or a tiger, and how, they treat their young, and you think this is literally a fraction of 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 1% of the manifestation of Allah's mercy. You can't even imagine that. That's literally, it's beyond comprehension. And so it's always to keep that in mind, that whatever I'm saying about Allah, when I talk about his generosity or his mercy or his justice, right? All of these different things, I am, in a sense, translating them to this human language, to this level that I can understand just a little bit, that I can get it just a little bit, right? But it's actually going to be nothing like I ever imagined. But it's just for us to feel okay, I get it. I think I get it a little bit, and I can build a relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at this level. But at the same time, it's actually ليس كمثله شيء. There's nothing like him. So, whatever Trevor Noah said, that human beings, impose, human characteristics on God. Yes, they do. But there's a religion that says, he is nothing like what you can imagine.
Yes. What's interesting is, I think what I see just happening to be in my social circles, what I see a lot more is the second misconception, where people take the mercy of Allah to mean kind of it's an excuse from their obligations. And I think it might actually stem a lot from the first misconception, that Allah is super harsh and out to get you. And so they just flip it. And then when they hear the opposite, then they're oh, actually none of this stuff is that serious, because God is so merciful. And people will say things is he really gonna send me to hell for showing my hair? Am I really gonna be damned for eating this burger? And I think what needs to be kind of clarified in those, when we say things like that, is Allah petty? No, absolutely not. But what is the significance of not, following the command of Allah to eat that which is halal and tayyib? It's that he repeats it so often, that the Prophet ﷺ emphasized the way he ate in so many different ways. It's the fact that, and I think it's not just the burger. It's, do I take seriously what Allah repeated and what his Prophet ﷺ lived out? But yeah, and I didn't even think about, how much we anthropomorphize God too. Because that leads, again, people seeing it, because it is unjust for a human being, for example, to be arrogant towards others, or to see themselves as above others. But one of the names of Allah is al-Mutakabbir, and he has the absolute right to have that name. So that's a really important point.
100%, subhanAllah. I think, it's actually very true. So I think in life, a lot of times when we have something that is a bit extreme, we end up responding with almost another extreme. And I found that I've been a bit, guilty of that, especially when I find people who are so like, oh my goodness, Allah hates me, I'm going to go to hell because X, Y, Z. And your immediate, response is to say, no, but Allah is X, Y, Z. And you only emphasize that, whereas kind of instead of going to the other extreme, it's actually to bring people back to the middle, right? And it's exactly like you said, mashallah, like literally so beautiful what you said, which is it's really about what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala find as important. Because we have to remember the Prophet ﷺ also, he wept, right? He wept for his ummah, right? He was worried for people. He was worried about punishment as well, right? And that's why, exactly as you said, when we say لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ, again, we really have to understand that we don't impose, our standards or the way we think of human beings on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? And so that's why we go to the Quran for guidance. That's why we understand his names and attributes, and then we live our lives in accordance with these names and attributes, which contain both names of beauty and names of majesty, attributes of beauty, attributes of majesty. So you'll see so much rahmah, but you will see he's al-qahar, you will see he's al-mutakabbir, right? That he's the dominant, that he's far above. And so you have all of these names and attributes in order for us to live life in a balanced way and not just to let ourselves go. But I loved what you said, mashallah.
Ustadha Jinan, I was just going to ask, so touching on what Sarah said about I'm going to get this word wrong, but anthropomorphizing God, which as a result of, the prevalent Western media and like depictions of Isa alayhi salam, Jesus, etc., it's forgive me if I'm the only one thinking this, but I think, some of our listeners may feel similarly. But, on one hand, we're saying we need to get to know Allah in these ways that are very personal to us and on our limited human level and understanding. And on the other hand, remember that he's nothing like us and like completely, the utmost in every regard. So that's one quandary I kind of have. How do we strike that balance between not reducing him, astaghfirullah, to like, human deficiencies, for example, or fallibilities, but on the other hand, still, regarding him in the majesty that he should be. And the second question I want to ask is, so oftentimes I've picked up a book about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's names and attributes, not yours yet, but inshallah I will. And you read the author's interpretations of the names and how they've related to their lives, etc., and examples we can see. And you said self earlier about how, as you grow up and as you go through your own journey of life, you see different areas in which these names of Allah really ring true. So how do we, and I read a name, and perhaps it's because I'm young and I have limited life experience, but I struggle sometimes to see how does this relate to me? How can I turn it from something I'm just reading into something that I can now internalize and transform this relationship that I want to have with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Just wondering what your thoughts were on that.
So I think with regards to the first question, I think at the end of the day, it reflects in the way that we behave, right? And so if, for example, I think of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, right? And I'm so, I'm really just reflecting upon his mercy and just thinking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is so merciful. But at the same time, this causes me to really, let myself go and not actually give importance to his commandments. That's when I've taken it too far, right? And this is where kind of, the fiqh and the internal, they come together, right? But there has to be some congruence. There has to be this, they have to be compatible, right? And so that's how you kind of know. It's like, how does this affect my behavior, right? So am I doing things that, that I understand that Allah views as wrong, right? So that's like on the one hand. On the other hand, if I start to find myself that I find that Allah is, so dominant and so that he takes everything into account, that I find myself being paralyzed, that I can't turn to him. But then wait, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that he loves for me to turn to him, right? So this is where you kind of, you take it away from this kind of like, it's all about how I feel. Like, it's not really about how you feel, right? It's subhanAllah, you understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the way that he describes himself. Like we said, like words have meanings. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala called himself Al-Kareem, the most generous, for a reason. And so you understand it in that way. And obviously, you give human examples just to bring it closer, right? But again, always having in the back of your mind that, okay, that Allah is so much, is just really beyond this. But then I look at the way it impacts my actions. So if I'm belittling, really belittling kind of actions that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said, is wrongful, that have been established. We're not talking about things that where there are like, differences of opinions and legitimate differences of opinions and things like that. That we're not, we're leaving those things aside. But let's just say, you start to, you don't pray, for example. You're just like, like Allah understands that I'm really sleepy, so I'm just not going to wake up for Fajr, right? And so you do that every single day, right? And it's just like, if you had something else, you'd wake up for it. You know what I mean? Like usually this is what it is. If you had a flight, if you had something, whatever it is, you'd wake up for it, right? And so that's when you're kind of, you are using that name of Allah actually to basically allow your desires to run free. So I think this is in a sense the way to strike this balance, is to actually look at myself and how am I behaving, right? How am I behaving in the sense that is what I am doing in line with what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told me to do, or is it not, right? And this, it applies to everything, internally and externally. So again, this feeling of like, I hate myself, I know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to punish me. It's like, well, okay, just if you go back to Allah, Allah says, just go back to Him and He will accept you. So just go back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Like ask for His forgiveness and then, move on and try to do good. So again, it applies to both of these kinds of levels. And that's how you know. That's in a sense how you know, and you kind of, you attempt, you try to strike that balance. And then with regards to your second question, that, sometimes, yes, you can read maybe Al-Ghazali's book or, some other book, and there's a nice, beautiful paragraph, and then he has kind of like how to think about it in your life, or his counsel, his advice to you. And you're just like, okay, it feels kind of theoretical. But again, it's like I said before, it's really about, deliberation and thinking and reflecting, right? So let's just say, like, for example, like I think one name that I really fell in love with, obviously I love all Allah's names, but one that is not, maybe not the most obvious is Allah's name, Al-Quddus. And because when I started actually, for me, writing about Allah's names was also to help me to reflect on Allah's names, right? Because there's some that you can find connection to really easily, like, the fact that He's merciful, the fact that He responds to your dua, and, all these ones, these are like the easy ones, right? But Allah's name, Al-Quddus, that He is, the holy or the pure. And the more I started really, thinking about, what does it mean to be Quddus? What does it mean to be holy, to be pure? And I found myself really being in awe of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the reason is, it's like literally, Allah being a Quddus means He's purified from, any kind of defect. And when you think that something is pure and something is holy, something is sanctified, right? That it has this aura around it, right? Then you think that Allah, He's free from any defect. Like, then you think actually, well, this is the way that I would think about that. Nothing is a mistake, right? That this is like, everything is exactly how it is. Like, not even how you were created, nothing that's happening in this world, this is not a mistake, and everything has a purpose because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't make mistakes. And you start to think of it in that way, but again, it requires this deliberation. So I can maybe offer like general advice, and then the second part is maybe advice that is more specific. I think the first thing is, when you take, a name of, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, actually to really think of what that name means in general. Right? So let's just say, again, you're thinking of a name that is not, maybe the most obvious one that you can connect to, like, for example, Al-Quddus, right? But every day start to think of what does it mean for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be Al-Quddus. And if you are like me and you like to write, then you can write it down. If not, you can even just discuss it with your friends if you have a WhatsApp group, you know what I mean? Like, this is the name that I'm thinking about today. And then after that, you start to think, okay, how does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, manifest His name, Al-Quddus? And then, slowly, maybe you'll start to see, subhanallah, I don't know, the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the universe, the things in your life, perhaps that maybe you thought were bad, but then they ended up being actually perfect, for your situation, something like that. And you take the steps, but again, it's a process. It's not just like, oh, I'm going to read this and I'm going to be like, oh, that's it, I totally get this name, right? It really requires, again, for you to build a relationship. Sometimes you might meet a person and, from day one you click, but sometimes it takes a while, right? Or maybe you do click from day one, but then the more you spend time with this person, the more you learn about, their different attributes. And so, subhanAllah, with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, maybe you connect to certain, names of His, but you don't to others. But it's really reflecting, writing about it, thinking about it, focusing, discussing with other people and seeing how they relate, right? And also, it doesn't mean also, when we say this, it's not just like at every single moment, you're going to be connected to every single name of Allah, right? Well, maybe, mashallah, some people are super special and they can do that. Like I can't, right? But I do find in different times of my life that I connect to different names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I find different, the way they manifest differently. So let's just say now, perhaps it's not a time in your life that you're really thinking of his name, Al-Halim, for example, the forbearing, right? But when you understand it, right? When something does happen in your life, you actually, because you know that Allah is Al-Halim, right? He's the forbearing. So something happens, you think, oh, subhanallah, I really felt this manifestation of Allah, of this name in particular. So I think it's also, not rushing yourself, not to be like, I read Al-Ghazali's book, why don't I understand? Or why don't I, feel connected to every single name of Allah, right? It doesn't work like that, right? It's something that, again, needs deliberation. It's something that really needs reflecting and thinking about, and really also asking Allah, right? Like asking Allah, Ya Rab, show me. And this is the thing, I think one thing we forget is like, okay, I need to do this on my own. No. Ask Allah, right? Nobody can show you Allah except Him, right? So ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to show you the manifestations of His names, right? To help you to understand them, to help you to connect to Him in different ways. And I think also, as well, if it helps, you can start, now everybody's on lockdown and people aren't meeting up, but start a WhatsApp group, start a Zoom halaqa, you know what I mean, where you reflect with other people. Because sometimes when you're with your peers, somebody explains something in a way that's actually more meaningful to you. They might be saying the exact same thing as, maybe Al-Ghazali, right? But they're saying it in such a way that now it makes sense to you. Now you're like, okay, I get it. And I see how this impacts my life, or I see how this is related to my life. So I think that's probably, what I can offer in terms of advice and what I find works for me. But I think the other part of it that's perhaps more personal is, yourself, right? Perhaps how you connect best. So maybe you read, Al-Ghazali's book and you're like, I don't connect, to, or I understand some, but others I don't feel I connect. But maybe you're more of a person that you like to listen to lectures, or you like to watch something, or you like to discuss. Like, this is something that's very personal, but it's what helps you to learn, what helps you to understand something more. So some people, it's through reading. Like this is like for them the best way to understand. They just sit with a book and they start to reflect. Others, it's through writing. Others, it's through being in a group. Others, it's through listening. So do the things that work for you, right? Because yourself better than anybody else. But again, with all of these, ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Say, when you don't understand a certain name, say, Ya Allah, I don't understand what this name of yours means. Just, show me. It might not be today, maybe in a week, maybe in a year, maybe in 10 years. Suddenly you're just like, Allah, oh my goodness, I totally understand this manifestation of this name, right? So again, it's a process. It's not something that like, khalas, it's not like memorizing the nasheed, which you can do in like a week, right? It's really, again, it's a process.
Mm-hmm. MashaAllah, I really love that. And just the idea that it's not like a textbook where you can read and finish, and yes, I've got the stamp, I finished that class. Yeah. It's a lifelong endeavor, which, I suppose will transform over time as well. As you, subhanAllah, live through these experiences. But it's also, I guess it sounds so strange because, you pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala every day and you make dua every day, but the fact that it just never occurred to me that you could ask, Ya Allah, can you help me understand this name because I'm struggling? And it's funny because exactly what you said, you think you're doing this by yourself and you're stuck in this vacuum, like, I gotta get this right, like, how do I do this? But subhanAllah, Allah's always there.
Exactly, 100%, subhanAllah. And also, just maybe to add to that, when you ask Allah, you're actually going to Him by several of His names, or you understand things about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that maybe you're not conscious of. But if you're asking Allah, then you recognize that He's a Sami', that He's the all-hearing because He can hear you, right? You're recognizing that He's al-Basir, right? Because you know that He sees you. You're recognizing that He is Kareem, that He's the most generous, because you're like, I'm asking Him and I'm hoping that He'll give me. So, you recognize His generosity. So when you ask Allah, you're actually recognizing so many of His names that maybe you're not even that conscious of. Like when you're going to Him, and let's just say you messed up, but you still make it a point to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for your needs, then you're recognizing that He's al-Ghafur, that He's the most forgiving, right? When, let's just say you're taking baby steps towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, And you know, maybe other people are able to do, you know, things in the spiritual realm or religiously that you're not able to, but you still try and you still go to Allah and you ask him. You're actually recognizing again that he's a sabur, he's a patient, because he's patient with you. He's not, you know, in a sense like saying, oh, you haven't gotten to this level yet, so don't ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala until you arrive at a certain level, right? It's like, no, you always ask Allah. So one of the ways of knowing Allah really is actually going and talking to him and making dua to him, because you're actually literally internalizing an understanding of Allah's names through your asking of him, whether you are conscious of that or not.
Yeah, absolutely. It reminds me as well of when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran, obviously, that he is closer to us than our jugular vein. You know, in the sense that he knows everything about us already. Like sometimes, as Aisha's saying, like we can be a bit, we feel like there's only certain things we can talk about with Allah, but Allah already knows literally everything. So nothing is off the table. Like you can talk to Allah and approach him and work through these things about everything. You've given some really, really great tips, Ustadha Jinan. But I wanted to ask how, well, perhaps, you know, all of us can fall into this situation at some point in our lives, and it may be the case for some of our listeners out there, that although Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is this close to us, we can't always recognize it. And sometimes, obviously, because we don't see him, that presents challenges to certain people, and it can be difficult to build that connection with him. And sometimes, even if people do have that connection, they can go through periods of time where they feel like they're drifting away. How would you, or what practical advice could you give for somebody who feels like, you know, they're drifting away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? What are perhaps the warning signs to look out for that you are drifting? And how would you practically make that journey back to him?
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say in terms of the warning signs, again, like most of us, you know, you know yourself best, right? And so when something, in a sense, becomes, it's repeated, right? So let's just say, slowly, you know, it's not like, you know, I don't know, you missed Fajr once, right? But suddenly it becomes, it's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 days, right? This is when you kind of notice, you're just like, oh, you know, wait a second. Or you used to, you know, dedicate, you know, 10 minutes a day to literally sit and talk to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know, slowly you find yourself rushing it and you're like, no, I'll get back to it, right? And then no, you're rushing it for like a few more months, and then you're kind of not doing it anymore. Or, you know, it went from 10 minutes to 5 to 3 to, I mean, 3 doesn't mean anything anyway, right? So I might as well not do it, right? So it's kind of when you find this really slow chipping away at, you know, certain things that you used to do, but also in, you know, your heart as well. If you find yourself, you know, in your prayer, for example, or even in your du'as, that you start to find that it is really something that's outward, that is external, that is just your tongue or just your limbs. And not just that, because we all go through that, right? But that you find in your heart almost a heaviness that you don't want to connect, right? I find that sometimes when we feel far from Allah, whether because we feel guilty about something, or, you know, something is, bothered us, or whatever it is, maybe we had a bad experience, religious experience, now we're questioning certain things. It really starts, you might be doing everything externally, right? So it's not just about, there's a reduction in, your physical activities, right? But it's actually in your heart that you suddenly feel that you're just like, I'm praying, but in my heart, I'm just like, I don't even want to connect. It's not even like I'm not connecting. It's like, I don't want to connect. So this is, in a sense, I would say some of the warning signs. In terms of what can you do? So obviously it depends, why you feel like you're drifting. Sometimes, you get so caught up because you're actually, literally busy with work, or you're busy with, you have a family and your kids. Sometimes it's more, to something, caused you doubt, for example. So it's there can be several things, and we can't really, address each one of them unless we know what they are. But in terms of just like general advice, I think one thing is, kind of to actually get up and just do what you need to do. I know that sounds very, very maybe reductive, but sometimes we spend a lot of time thinking, right? I need to do this, or I feel far from Allah, and we can talk about it. We can come and say, Aisha, like I just, I feel far from Allah. Sarah, I feel, far from Allah. Other Aisha, I feel far from Allah. And we can, talk about it, right? All the time. But it's actually just about getting up and doing something, right? So if I feel far from Allah, but you know what, let me force myself right now. I don't feel like praying witr, but I'm going to force myself to pray witr. I'm not in the mood. I just want to scroll through my phone and just look at Instagram, right? But I'm actually going to force myself to sit down on my prayer mat. Even if I'm not going to pray, but I'm just going to talk to Allah. I'm actually going to tell Allah how I feel. I'm going to say, Ya Rab, I feel far. And I don't know why I feel far. Or like, I just, you know, there's just so much going on in my life that I just feel like I'm not even prioritizing my relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Literally just talk to Allah, right? I think that's the first thing. So just in a sense, doing something, right? And I think there's really value in just getting up and doing. Because, you know, what can happen is, you know, we really sit and like we're philosophizing about things and just, you know, thinking and like, oh my goodness, I feel far and this and that. And, you know, it can happen, you know, let's just say with things that are worldly, right? I'm feeling, you know, really lazy and lethargic and, you know, and you think you're just like, oh, I feel so bad about myself. It's like, okay, how about, you know, getting up and doing 10 jumping jacks or something like that, right? And at the end of the day, like when you do it, even if it's just 10 jumping jacks or you go out for a run, whatever it is, subhanAllah, your body actually, you know, it reacts, a lot of times it reacts positively to that, right? Like just the fact that you got up and you did, right? And so it's actually, you know, the same in the spiritual realm. Like you can sit and think and like lament over the fact that you feel that you're far from Allah, but just get up and do one thing, just one thing that you feel, you know, brings you closer to Him. I think the other thing is also take it step by step, right? A lot of times we become consumed by guilt because we feel that we're far from Allah, right? And so the guilt makes us feel that, you know, it's literally all or nothing, right? So it's like, if I'm not doing all, then khalas, like I'm on the side of nothing, right? But let's just take things step by step. If you're struggling with prayers, if you're struggling with dua, if you're struggling with whatever it is that you're struggling with in your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, take it step by step. Do something really small that you feel like, hey, you know what, I can do this. It's, you know, like if somebody is finding it hard to, whatever, you know, finding, you know, praying on time, you know, really hard. Okay, then choose one prayer that you're going to pray on time. You know what I mean? I'm not saying ignore the others, but say one, no, you're going to do it. Or let's say reciting the Quran. I can't do a juz a day, it's so much. Okay, so don't recite a juz a day. Say you're going to recite for 2 minutes. You will time yourself and it's just going to be 2 minutes. At the end of the day, your mind, your soul, everything is going to say, like, I can do 2 minutes, right? I can recite Quran for 2 minutes. That 2 minutes is going to turn to 3. It's going to turn into 5, inshallah. It's going to turn into 10. But even that, 2 is better than 0. So again, it's about, number 1, just get up and just, you know, do something. Number 2, take it step by step. Right? Like, don't be like, it has to be all or nothing. I have to be either super Muslim or like barely Muslim, you know, like, no, it's like, there's like this middle area, right? That, you know, you can take those steps to Allah. And that's why, you know, beautiful hadith Qudsi, right? And we all know it, but that if you take one step towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He comes to you at speed. It's almost like Allah knows that sometimes we're going to be at a certain point in our life where we're taking really, really small and slow steps towards Allah, that, you know, He knows us. And He's saying, but if you still take those steps, right, then He will come to you. So it's almost like He's telling you, it doesn't matter how slow and, you know, how small those steps are. You do that and He will come to you. Thirdly, I would say, this is something that I think is, you know, advice that my teacher gave me when I was 12 years old, and, you know, and I still do this, right? And honestly, talk to Allah. And I think to some people it sounds strange, like, what does it mean? We make dua to Allah, we do dhikr of Allah, right? But we don't talk to Allah. No, talk to Allah. I mean, literally talk to Allah, right? Like, talk to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala about your day, right? If you feel that, oh my goodness, this colleague, you know, instead of calling your friend, you know, you can still call your friend, but also talk to Allah, right? You know, your colleague, you know, annoyed you that day or did something that you're just like, oh, this was really inappropriate, for example. Just be like, Ya Allah, I feel really down. Ya Rab, I'm just sad about, you know, what my colleague did today. And I know, subhanAllah, people all over the world are suffering with much bigger things. And like, I recognize that. But Ya Allah, I just want to tell you that I just feel really down because of this. And you'll feel so much better because Allah is a Sami', right? Allah is the all-hearing. Allah is listening to you. Allah was watching as you felt this discomfort, you know, that you went through with your colleague, right? So now you can express that to Him. And it really takes your relationship, you know, with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to like a different level. The other thing that I would say is, you know, again, as we said, you know, when you say you feel distant from Allah, it can mean different things to different people, right? But let's just say you are a person who is doing your obligatory, acts, but you still feel far from Allah. So add meaning to them, to the obligatory acts, right? So for example, when you're praying, and this is so important, and again, there are so many things, resources online. You can watch a clip on YouTube. There's a series on virtualmosque.com, the one I spoke about before, how to taste the sweetness of prayers, right? That'll tell you just an internal element of every single action that you do. And then in the next prayer, you can try to implement that, right? And so again, we turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala 5 times a day, right? And so how can that be without meaning? So again, it's like, let me try to add meaning. Let me try to understand. Let me understand who I'm standing in front of. Mm-hmm. And then I would say, again, learn from teachers that you connect to. Like now, in a sense, we don't have many excuses because there's so many resources online. Of course, it's not the same as, maybe, studying with somebody or something like that. But there are still a lot of resources, whether, you're watching your favorite teacher on YouTube, but also there's a lot of online institutes now, right? Where you can actually directly study with a teacher. So again, it's just really investing the time and just making that commitment and saying, you know what? I connect to this person when they talk about Allah or when they teach about the religion. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sign up at their institute for this course, for example, right? And that helps. Finally, make sure that your company, is one that reminds you of Allah. And, whether that is like virtual company as well, or just with your friends, like, you can go out with your friends and have fun and do whatever it is that you want to do. But at the same time, make sure you have some time together where you remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala together. Maybe, start a charity project together and be like, group of friends, whatever, we're 4 or 5 friends. Let's do this for the sake of Allah. And our intention is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, unites us under his shade on the Day of Judgment as well. Right? This gives so much meaning to like this charity project, that you're doing once you start to add layers and layers of intention to that. And also you feed off the energy of other people, right? Of the people, in your group. And so I think those types of things, they can help us to kind of go back to Allah, right? We drifted away, but again, this is a quote from Imam Suhaib Webb, which is, if you feel distant from Allah, then ask yourself, who moved, right? Allah is there. I'm the one who moved away, so I just need to move back, right? And we shouldn't make it, in a sense, like more difficult than it is. Allah doesn't make it more difficult than it is. Take whatever step that you can, and inshallah, Allah is there. He didn't move.
MashaAllah. I just want to emphasize how crucial the point about like just doing what you need to do, how that's such a good advice for like so many things in life, especially for people like me who overthink a lot and who have this like dual issue of like perfectionism but also procrastination at the same time, because you have to be in like the perfect conditions to start working on this, or I can only do this in like the best way possible, and like thinking about how to do the thing instead of just doing it. And it became like a slogan in my head that's like, it's not eloquent at all, but like to get myself to do what I need to do, I just say, okay, just do the thing. And it helps to like just move. And it kind of, I think it's related to the whole like fake it till you make it thing, where like putting your body into like the physical space to do something, just doing the rote actions, it starts to have meaning. We can't think that like we would like to, have spiritual epiphanies and then everything falls into place. But sometimes it requires getting up, and even that act of getting up when it feels difficult, when you feel lazy, is a sign in itself of like some spiritual connection, that like I care enough about what Allah has asked me to do that I'll push myself to do it right now, even if it doesn't feel, again, like I don't have that amazing dhawq yet. I'm just doing it right now, and that's something. It counts for something, alhamdulillah.
It counts for a lot. It's not just something, it's a lot. Because the thing is, when it's difficult for you and yet there's something in you, right, that is pushing you to be like, no, Allah loves this and I'm going to do it. Like that, subhanAllah, like you don't know what that is worth in the eyes of Allah, right? Like that is, it's like, it's almost like it's everything, because, you're not relying on motivation or like I'm feeling it, therefore I'm doing it, right? It's just like I'm not feeling it, but Ya Rab, I'm still going to do it, right? I'm still going to do it for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And subhanAllah, that might even mean so much more.
I'm going to quickly jump in and ask one last thing before we move on to the next bit. But Ustadha Jinan, one of the things that I really liked or picked up on was, how you were saying you need to cultivate this relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and just speak to him. Just sit down and say, Ya Allah, I've had this really tough day. And I've seeing this with, like, for example, Christian youths, I know that they have this, speak to God, talk to him, but it's American because that's the only American Christian youths I know. But in terms of, like, in Islam, what I've experienced so far anyway, is there's always like these etiquettes of dua, for example, where you have to be in a certain way, and the way that you lay out your dua, there's certain ways that they're recommended in order to make your dua most accepted. Or it just feels like you're in this very, and you always reminded that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, Al-Alim, Al-Kabir, and he's, there's such importance. It's like sometimes it almost feels like I'm just bringing these really trivial things. Like, I wouldn't go to a king and be like, yo, king, I feel really sad today. Like, help me out of this funk kind of thing. And it almost feels like, what do I do? Do I just sit there and stare down at my tasbih or my prayer mat? Do I raise my hands in dua? Like, how do I do this? Like, it feels so foreign, so odd. Like, sometimes the things that, you want to pour your heart out about, like, I wouldn't even go to my parents sometimes if it's really, really something, sensitive, or I don't feel comfortable sharing. And obviously Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would be the perfect one to speak to about this. But, like, how do you get over that, I guess, awkwardness that you can sometimes feel?
I'm going to use a Nike slogan and say, just do it, right? So basically, I mean, it is in a sense like it's that simple. It's not that simple, right? It is that simple, which is like, just do it, right? Because again, like I'm telling you, my teacher, told me this. It's just like early 2000s, I want to say, right? I would say something like that. And it wasn't like a thing, right? I don't know where she got it from, but she had studied. So, this is what she taught us. And I found it so weird. And like, 12, 13 years old. And I was just like, this is so weird, right? But it starts to become a habit, and you actually start to enjoy it, right? That like literally, and again, yes, we have all these etiquettes of dua and all that, but we have to remember that they are etiquettes, right? That they are, in a sense, you're doing it to, in a sense, really show reverence to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But are they requirements, right? They're not, right? Like you pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even if whatever you're lying down, you're not in a state of, tahara, so on and so forth. You can still ask Allah. You don't say, oh, I'm not going to ask him now because I'm not like this. Like, yes, to be in the best state, of course you do. Of course, right? You should try that. But if you don't, it's not like you don't ask Allah, because the Prophet ﷺ, he said, the Prophet ﷺ told us that Allah does not respond to, he didn't say the one who doesn't have wudu, he didn't say the one who's not facing the qibla, right? He said Allah does not respond to the one whose heart is distracted, right? Like that's the condition for, your dua to be accepted. So like there's conditions, and then there's etiquettes, and obviously etiquettes, they are recommended, absolutely, right? Like we don't belittle the etiquettes, but again, we have to kind of make a distinction between etiquette and requirement. So that's the first thing. The other thing is in terms of, talking to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like, again, like, yes, it might, again, seem strange the first time you do it because we're not used to it. We're kind of, we almost, we've created this distance between us and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because, we want to really remind people to have this awe of Allah, right? And it's so important to like be in awe of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? But I find in doing that and trying to really get this awe of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I think also sometimes, scholars might have done that because they felt that the only way for us to obey Allah is only to be in awe of him, right? And maybe that worked for a certain generation. Maybe it works for certain people that like when they are so in awe of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they have this deep reverence of like this, obviously reverence, respect, and all of that. And, you kind of, you don't go to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for like the unimportant things, the trivial things, right? But the Prophet ﷺ didn't say that. He said the Sahaba would ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for like if their sandal strap, right? It's like if it got, if like ripped or cut or something like that. That's quote unquote trivial. But they knew Allah. They talk to Allah, right? When you think of somebody who's weeping before Allah, like, you're weeping, before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because you know who Allah is and you know that he knows what's in your heart and you're pouring out your heart to him. And for me, the biggest example of somebody who talked to Allah, right? As the mother of Maryam, alayha salam, in the Quran, right? She's literally like, the first part of it is not a dua. She's saying, "Inni nadartu laka ma fi batni." Like, she's saying that, this child that I'm carrying is, for you. I want, this child to be in your worship. And she's just talking to Allah. She's just literally telling Allah like her intentions. And then she says, "Okay, accept him from me." Right? So it's like, okay, the dua in the end is like, accept this child from me, right, to be in your service. But the first part before that is literally her just like talking to Allah. And I always find, I'm like, how do we not notice this? We notice at the end, we're just like, oh, she asked Allah for something. But the beginning part was literally her just like telling Allah what is in her heart, telling Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala like what she intends, for this child. And she didn't think it was too trivial. She wasn't like, I just need to ask Allah for this. No, she's like giving this background, even though she knows Allah knows, right? And I think it's really, again, like it's just doing it, right? Being like, you know what, let me set aside 5 minutes before Fajr, after Fajr, like just, connect it to like something that you already do, and say, 5 minutes before, it might be, 5 minutes before Fajr, because I want to get my mind kind of like in the right place so I can focus. Let me just I'm going to time it 2 to 3 minutes, and I'm just going to talk to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Be like, Ya Rab, I really hope this, today goes well, because, XYZ, I wasn't feeling really good, or I'm super tired, but, Ya Allah, I really hope that, you can help me through this day. And I have so many, goals, whatever, like however you want to talk to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I'll just say like a funny story. I remember a long time ago, the first time I went to New York, I had stopped over there, for a night, because I was going back home, and I lost my phone. I think I dropped it in the taxi or something, and I think the next day was maybe Yom Arafah or Ashura. It was a voluntary fasting day, and I had a friend who came to stay with me at the hotel I was staying at. And it was funny. So I was really sad about my phone. Like I was so sad about my phone, because like it had like just everything, like messages from people and things like that. It was just like this sentimental thing. And I was feeling really sad. I remember, we woke up before Fajr. We're like, let's pray Qiyam together, before, waking up before, for Suhoor. And I remember, praying witr, we prayed witr separately. I remember, literally this is what I was thinking. I was like, Ya Allah, I know this is like so trivial, and I know that there are people like starving in the world, and I'm just so embarrassed, but like I'm so sad that I lost my phone. Ya Rab, I am so sad, right? And I really was like genuinely, and I'm like, I can tell my friend I'm so sad. She can't do anything for me. Where is she gonna bring the phone from, right? And so I was like, Ya Rab, I would just like, I would love, and just because I'm asking you because you're al-Mujib, and I know that nobody else can bring me my phone back except you. And if I don't get my phone back, then alhamdulillah, then it's a lesson for me that like not to be attached to like possessions or whatever, but like, Ya Rab, I really want my phone back, right? And this is like the way that I express myself to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And long story short, this person who works at the UN found my phone in a cab, and I was reunited with my phone.
Wow.
So just to let you, so you talk to Allah, and I was literally sitting, I was like, you know what? I had said the adhkar, the Prophet ﷺ said, like you say these adhkar, that no harm will come to you. So I have confidence in that. So whether I get my phone back, it means, alhamdulillah, I said the adhkar, Allah protected me. And if I lost my phone, then that was also a protection. I was really, and again, by the way, I'm not saying like, oh my goodness, mashallah, so super holy. It's like really you have to force yourself, to really think in that way and to really internalize that, right? So it was really like, it's a struggle, but I was like, it's a phone, Jinan, you're not dying, it's a phone, right? But then subhanAllah, I got the phone back, and it's just like, you ask Allah, because at the end of the day, what's big to you is not big to him. So when you think, oh, I'm only going to ask Allah for the big stuff and not the little stuff, it's like you're saying it's big to him as well. Like it's not, like everything for him is the same. You know what I mean? Like it's not whatever, changing the world, bringing back your phone, all of those exactly the same. For us, this is big and this is small. To Allah, it's all super tiny.
That's so true. SubhanAllah. So, Ustadha, we're coming towards the end of our conversation now. Inshallah, we will put a link to your book as well in the description of this episode. But do you have any advice, besides simply reading it, of how we could, inshallah, make the most of your book?
Absolutely. So I think one thing actually in the end of the book, it does say how you can best use the book. But basically, don't actually simply read it, right? I mean, take the time to really think about it. I honestly, if it takes you a year to read the book, then, that's a good thing. Don't be like, I have to finish this book in a week or in a month or whatever it is. Take one chapter at a time, reflect on it, write down your reflections, journal about it, start a halaqah, right? Whatever. Again, you can do it in so many different ways. You can do it on WhatsApp. You can do it with, your family at home. Maybe even summarize it, right? Like send a little summary, to your group of friends or to your family, or even try to explain it, right? Let's just say you have younger siblings or you have children, right? Because then that helps you to think about it in a different way. You can explain it to somebody else, and you can perhaps see the manifestation of that name in your life. life. And of course, call Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by that name as well. So I really do recommend, taking it slow, right? And, not, just reading it in order to finish it, right? Again, I'm completely happy for somebody to say it's been a year and I still haven't finished the book, as long as, you're actually reading, and not just reading, but actually reflecting on it. And I think that's a good sign, right? So that's, those are most of my recommendations of how to inshallah, make the most of the book.
And Ustadha Jinan, just absolutely lastly, what would you say your favorite name or sifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is at this very moment anyway?
So yeah, subhanAllah, as I said before, like at different times, they are different names. And when I was thinking of this question, I was thinking, subhanAllah, what name am I connecting to? And I think it's definitely for me right now, it's as-sabur, the patient, right? And again, because thinking of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being, patient, like patience is such a beautiful attribute. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He praises the patient. When human beings are patient, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala praises them in the Quran. So what of Allah being the patient, right? And that just makes me think that, subhanAllah, when Allah, patience comes with also like this gentleness, right? And so when Allah is basically patient with us and, patient with me, like I was recently thinking, I messed up with something and I'm so annoyed with myself, and just, kind of you spiral downwards and think, why did I do this? Or I did this again, or whatever. I never get this right, and you start to really kind of put yourself down, right? But then you think, wait a second, like give yourself a break, be like, fine, I messed up. I recognize, I own my mistake, right? But it's about what I do with my mistake right now. And I know that Allah is patient. And the fact is that Allah loves that when I made this mistake, I actually get back up and think, okay, how can I make this better? And then I move towards Him. So it's not about the mistake. And He's patient with me. He's not saying, if you don't get this right now, then khalas, you're never going to get it, right? Allah's not saying that if you're not, again, super Muslim in a day and a night, then there's no use for you, right? But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is patient with me as long as I'm trying. So what's on me is just to try, literally to get up and to do. And no matter if I fall down, but I get back up, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is there. And so I've been finding that I connect to this name of Allah a lot recently, subhanallah. And so I would say that, for now, we are February 7th, 2021, and this is the name that I'm connecting to, because subhanallah, before this I was thinking of Allah's names al-wasi', but literally I think, this week it's been Allah's name as-sabur.
Alhamdulillah. I think it's a beautiful name, as all of them are, but it's a great one, and I think will resonate with many people, because obviously going through the pandemic and just the days seemingly kind of blurring into one and it seeming very endless for people, ultimately patience from as-sabur is what we all need right now. But with that, inshallah, I think we will wrap up here. Jazakallah khair so much, Ustadha Jinan. We've had a really, really amazing conversation. Inshallah, if you could just let us know, if people wanted to connect with you and follow your work more, how could they get in touch with you? Where can they follow you on social media?
So usually, I post a lot of stuff on Instagram. It's j.yousef_, I think. And then there's also actually a really cool app that I was introduced to recently. It's called Quran Reflect. And it's basically like a social media app for reflecting on the Quran. And there are a lot of other shuyukh as well. Sheikh Umar Sulaiman, there's, Dali Mujahid, there's Sheikh Mohammad Shinawi, and so on and so forth. And basically, how you want to scroll through your Instagram feed, you can actually just scroll through a Quran reflections feed. So I started, kind of putting my reflections, Quranic reflections on there, and then also posting it to other social media channels. But I think mostly I would say the most up-to-date one is the Instagram, and then the Quran Reflect one. So that's those are where you can find me.
Okay, amazing, alhamdulillah. And also, I believe you are running a class soon, inshallah, on your book.
Yes, I am. Yes, subhanAllah, I totally forgot about that. But yes, inshallah, starting on 20th of February at Suhaib Web Institute. It's going to be online. It's a live class. And it's recorded if the timing is not suitable for people, or, they need to miss one class or anything like that. The classes are recorded. And so, we'll be studying the names in the book, and I'll be explaining them, and inshallah, hopefully interacting with people in the live class. So SuhaibWebInstitute.com, February 20th will be bi'idhnillah, the first class.
Okay, that's great, inshallah. We'll definitely put the link to that in the description as well. Thank you so much again, Ustadha Jinan, for giving us your time today. With that, inshallah, we will properly wrap up. We ask all our listeners to, inshallah, keep Ustadha Jinan and the whole Qarawiyyin Project team in their du'as. Be sure to keep up with our recent articles on our website and follow us on social media. And we have, alhamdulillah, launched our monthly newsletter. If you want to keep off social media but want to keep up with our latest content, subscribe via our website and inshallah you'll receive our latest articles, podcast episodes, and some other recommended reads that we believe are interesting. Until next time, Jazakallah khairan for listening. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.